Another terrible award to get. It's the creep of the year. Creep, creep, creep of the year, of the year. He or she is the creep of the year. We did a lot of Grinchy stuff on the last episode, but I'm going to keep that ball rolling here. First of all, I didn't like an NFL game every day this past week or more. It sort of dampened the overall experience for what it's worth. Um, which is nothing. It doesn't mean anything to the executives who make these decisions, but the quality of the games all sucked. I also still think, to go back to the start of the NFL season, we don't need important divisional matchups in week one. Next, March Madness is fun. It's not a great evaluator of who the best team in the nation is. I am bothered by people who pretend to be sexually aroused by offensive line play and fat guys scoring touchdowns. I don't like white guys doing the gritty. I still don't like Jacob Truba. I'm sorry for what he's been through in the last couple of months of his life. Nevertheless, I don't like him. I'm bothered by Gronk, one of the all-time greats at his position, maybe still the greatest, and he's a multi-millionaire, and he's doing well, and he doesn't need my counsel. But who convinced him that he has to act like an absolute moron all the time in every commercial? Is this what you want? You made it, man. You got over the hump of life. You can stop acting like you're an imbecile to make money. I think you'll still get hired for it. Cut that crap out. Um, those jumbo caps that they wear in NFL games, I think we all want to be empathetic and say like, hey, that's cool. If that keeps you safe and out on the field, that's fine. But I finally figured out what it is that's bothering me. They look like those old Dairy Queen ice cream football helmets. That's exactly what they look like. They're not the right color. We got to figure that out. It's good for safety, but it's bad for my eye and as an aesthete. Um, the Christmas commercials and music, I don't like when people complain about them starting too early. This is how empty your life is. You're bothered by joy and festivity. They can start by October, earlier if you want, but they absolutely have to end by 12:01 on December 26th. I can't stand seeing Christmas or hearing Christmas songs as soon as Christmas is over. Um, and same goes for any in-season commercial featuring a star player if that player gets hurt and or his team stinks. It's bad if you're rooting for a guy and you're like, yeah, he's ruining our team's season. I don't want to see him. It doesn't sell the product. But here are the two finalists for Creep of the Year. One, I think the QB league stuff has finally gotten bad for the sport of pro football. The Steelers are in this purgatory without a QB in the QB league and have been for half a decade. And it's admirable that they keep making the playoffs and everything. But it's starting to take on a vibe. Tell me what you think about this, Hench. A little bit of that NBA, the only way is to shoot a high volume and make a high volume of three pointers. It has become the Steelers are the one team out there that's going to be in the postseason. I feel like this season that was trying to knuckleball their way, trying to go defense dominant to win a title. It's not going to happen, obviously. It seems clear, even more so than like you just got to have a couple few perimeter shooters in the NBA. Like if you don't have the QB, if you don't have a top 8 QB, you have no chance in the league. And I think ultimately that's getting bad for the league. How say you?
Well, I mean, the good news is there's such depth at the position. Like there are so many great QBs that I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think that that's like whether, top eight is, throughout NFL history, it's like, yeah, whether it's because of your quarterback or something else, no, there are only eight teams ever that were going to win any Super Bowl going into any year, right? I mean, that's always been the way it is. So now it's like, because the forward pass has evolved as the way to matriculate the ball down the field, you need a good quarterback. I mean, I personally prefer watching 31-28 games over 17-13 games. So I think
I
the
suppose I
QB,
just it's the only method to success though. Yeah, you know what I mean? There's no variation at this point. I mean, the Steelers have two Hall of Famers in Watt and Hayward and a high-end performer in Minka Fitzpatrick. really strong overall, top to bottom on that defense, and it means nothing. I mean, it gets you to the playoffs, but they have no chance before the thing ever kicks
But
off.
I would
If you
also
don't
say,
have one of those guys, then you have no
I would
shot.
also say that like what Sam Darnold is doing in Minnesota and what maybe Purdy did last year with the Niners, there are a lot of guys who can be coached up into that contender level. Like, I mean, obviously coming into the season, you wouldn't think Sam Darnold was on that list. And now he's absolutely on that list. Like that team could go to the Super Bowl. Like we'll get to our NFL picks in a bit, but like it's you can't just be delivering dimes for touchdowns every week and not. I mean, Sam Darnold's going to have the best season for anybody who ever finished sixth in the MVP voting in NFL
Hmm.
history. Like it's crazy. So I mean, yes, you don't have a top 10 quarterback in Pittsburgh, but that, and by the way, that defense you're supposed to be relying on has been allowing 28 points a game for a month or 6 weeks. So, the Steelers are going to go out. Ironically, they're going to get an even crappier team in round one, but the Steelers will go out in round two where they should.
Oh, that hash still needs to be settled. Let me tell you the creep of the year, though, and it's a pair of guys, um, the faces of college football. Kirk Herbstreit and Nick Saban. I think it's funny that these two have turned into a couple of school marms, telling everybody to keep it down or they're going to get grounded. Like, we're not allowed to have opinions anymore. We're getting shouted down by everybody who sits on that panel if we disagree with them about stuff. I legitimately think that we are one remark that Kirk Herbstreit disagrees with away from him telling us we're not allowed to watch round two. It's sort of like when my sister Amy back in I've told the story in 81 did something bad and she wasn't allowed to watch Pitt Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, so I had to report to her from the bottom of the stairs, Pitt just scored. I think that's how we may have to consume it with Saban. I think my guess is that Herbstreit and Saban, somebody got in their ear and told them, "You're entertainment enough. The quality of the games is besides the point. You guys are such cards. America is so in love with you. Just tell them what to think, and they'll follow along." I disagree, but that does take us into our college football picks. And I think beyond just Herbie and Saban, I think the thing that's gotten sideways here is this is a 12-team playoff, and people continue to try to apply the 4-team standard. Indiana and Arizona State and Alabama were never vying for the fourth seed in a 4-team tournament. It's a 12-team tournament. Ergo, those teams aren't going to be as lustrous. By the way, it's pretty interesting to do that thing of like, what would the 4-team playoff look like this season? Really, only Oregon would definitely 100% be locked in, and probably Eddie Spaghetti's Irish too, because after that, you're talking about these two lost teams like Texas and Georgia, and Ohio State, and I think it would probably be Oregon, Texas, Irish, and Georgia over Ohio State because the Buckeyes already played and lost to one playoff team versus Georgia, who played and beat a playoff team twice even. So I think that's a weird math too. But either way, Sugar Bowl upcoming here. It's a rematch of the 1980 scandal. It should have featured the Pitt Panthers, who instead went and played the Gator Bowl against George Rogers and the Gamecocks. The Georgia Bulldogs vanquished the two-loss Irish, leading them to their first national title with Vince Dooley. In this one, I think this is the best game of the lot in round two. Georgia laying one at the time of this recording. Two, Notre Dame, Riley Leonard versus Gunnar Stockton. It's a huge spot for the Dogs' sophomore backup. Carson Beck, high pedigree. He's also got a weird vibe about him. It does feel like the players and Georgia's more comfy with Gunnar. And keep this in mind too, for all the talk about oh my God, the backup QB's got to play. This is college football. This is Georgia. Gunnar Stockton is better than any recruit than any second tier team has on its roster. He is also a high pedigree guy. Keep that in mind. Love those Irish runners, but ATN and Frazier are high end runners too. I think the Riley Mills absence seems real tough. On the other hand, the SEC is meh It didn't get a ton of coverage, but I think that this was the most noteworthy result of round one. For all the talk about Ryan Day should have already been fired, and if he loses here, he's definitely going to get fired. They kicked the shit out of Tennessee. And what were the Vols, like the third best team in the SEC? I think we have continued to overrate the SEC all through this season long. I hope the Irish wear green numbers out there. I think this one is close, but and as dumb as it is, I'm sorry to say this, I just can't ride with the team that lost at home to NIU, 30-26 Bulldogs. Hench, how say you?
I can ride with the team that lost to Northern Illinois.
Ooh, fun.
But I'm with you on the on the SEC. And the way this playoff, it's like we talk about justice, injustice. The justice of this playoffs will be to reveal how dumb the whole thing was set up. So
Yes.
I think, spoiler alert, I think the 1 and 2 seeds both go down. Starting with Notre Dame beating Georgia 23-20.
Love it. Spaghetti.
Yeah, I mean, Shek, I think I don't want to crush your analysis, but bringing up the NIU loss in September is irrelevant to this game. I don't think that has anything to do with anything. They
It's
they
the
both
same players.
it doesn't. It's a totally different team, and Riley Leonard also was not healthy in September at all, coming off of offseason ankle surgery. So I completely reject that. I mean, Carson Beck, you can say what you want about Gunnar Stockton, and he is a very high recruit. I know he had a fantastic high school career, but Carson Beck is going to go in the NFL, and it does the amount of college starts, high pressure college starts, is something you really can't replace. And I think not having Carson Beck is a huge loss. I do think Riley Mills is a big loss for Notre Dame, but Howard Cross coming back helps that. And again, the same thing what you said about Stockton is Notre Dame has a fantastic D line with depth as well. So I'm not too worried there. Plus the strength of this defense outside of the D line is the defensive backfield, and I think a young quarterback coming in here, an experienced quarterback coming in with you have Xavier Watts, Leonard Moore, a bunch of really good dogs, not bulldogs, but just dogs, and then Notre Dame defensive backfield is going to be the difference. Jeremiah Love healthy, and I think Riley Leonard's ability to create plays with his feet and check it down if he has to, find Mitchell Evans, the big tight end, I think will be the difference here. And you're looking at like common opponents like the Georgia Tech game. Notre Dame beat Georgia Tech 31-13. Georgia needed 8 overtimes to beat them by 2 points. And if anyone watched that game, we know how brutal the referees were. I just think Bert Auburn, the kicker, the normally good kicker for Texas, if he hits one of 2 missed field goals, we're not talking about this game right now because Texas would have won the SEC title game. Georgia's not as good as they were in years past. Notre Dame is a top 5 scoring offense and a top 5 scoring defense. Georgia does not rank top 10 in any major category. They are pretty far down the list. They're 11th in passing yards, but there's no Carson Beck. 26th in the country in points for. They're tied for 19th in the defensive points against. They're 100th in college football in rushing yards per game. So I just think Notre Dame is the better team, but people have this SEC dominance. This Georgia must be good because we're used to every NFL player seemingly being from Georgia. It's just not the same team. It's not the same team. And
I agree with that part.
I don't get the whole they're being favored in this one. I think it's a blessing in disguise, maybe for Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman, now the Dodd Coach of the Year, won that award today. I don't like being a homer for Notre Dame. It makes me very uncomfortable because they usually lose these big games, but I truly do think they're the better team. They will win this game.
All right, there you have it. Good luck to your Irish, Eddie Spaghetti. Know you're living and dying with them and don't have a lot of New York to lean on right now.
I don't.
So best to you. Next up, worst alphabet letter. I mean, this is, I maybe just will retire this one after this one because I don't know what alphabet letter is ever going to overtake it. It's the letter C. What this letter represents, it's a fraud in our lives right out in the open there. First of all, it would be nice and tidy if we only had 25 letters, not 26. It's way up there in the standings. A, B, C, it always comes up, but it's very much like the Draymond Green in that equation of, same as the Dubs had Draymond Green. He was the third member. I think that's what the letter C is. Do you know what makes the K sound? It's the letter K. That's all we need. If you need something to make the S sound, I have another letter for you. It's an S. The C also just jams itself into places it has no business, like in scissors. You think I don't notice that? Maybe other people. ain't paying attention. But I see you, Scissors. What are you doing? You have no business being in that word. Stay out of it. You know what? Stay out of our alphabet, as a matter of fact. Beat it, C. You're the worst alphabet letter. Next up, classic Big Ten, Pac-10 matchup in the Rose Bowl where it belongs. The Buckeyes, the Bucks, the Ducks. This is weird that the Ducks are plus 2.5 at the time of this recording. At least I think so. Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel, at least three first names between the two starting quarterbacks. Dylan is the least first namey of those names. Either way, I'm taking the Ducks here on a hunch. I don't see much of a reason for the game not to look very much like it did in Eugene a couple of months ago. That one was 32-31, I think, Oregon surviving Will Howard with a couple of stumbles there, mental and otherwise, in that last minute there. It sure looked like Ohio State was about to win that game or at least get a shot at the game-winning field goal. I'm playing a hunch here. Ducks survive this one 33-32. Obviously, I'm not going to be surprised if it goes the other way. Hench, how say you?
I agree. It's going to look a lot like that first game, and it can look like 99% like that first game and have a different result, which is exactly what I think is going to happen. I like the Buckeyes by 3 here. I just think they flipped a switch against Tennessee. They just look like a completely different team,
Yeah.
shot out of a cannon. And obviously for the Ducks, this is the worst possible matchup. This is your reward for being the number one team in the nation, is the team that you beat by a point getting another shot at you at a neutral site. Is just so brutal for the Ducks. And I think Will Howard and Ryan Day get it done. This is all leading to a title game between Ryan Day and James Franklin, where one of those guys is going to be the national title holder when everybody's like they should be fired. That's where this is all heading.
Hysterical, and you're exactly right. And what the hell did Texas do to deserve the Sun Devils? And the Ducks are catching Ohio State. It's insane. Spaghetti, how say you?
This is a very tough game to pick. You know, going back to that game where they matched up against each other, the difference in that game was Dylan Gabriel kind of played the part. He just seemed comfortable. Will Howard looked like he was kind of out of his element. Obviously, made a bonehead. Didn't understand the clock in the late game environment. I also can't get out of my head about how bad Ohio State looked versus Michigan. They didn't look explosive versus Penn State either in that close win, the one touchdown win, but they were just so bad versus Michigan. I just feel like where Oregon needs to score, they will always score. Look at all their scores, on all their victories. They're scoring 40 plus points a game. Even though the other teams score a bunch of points, they're still able to score. And I just feel like that Ohio State just couldn't get things going versus Michigan, and Dylan Gabriel just being a prolific passer. And I'm afraid that Will Howard, who looked fantastic versus Tennessee, and they definitely that kind of changed my perspectives. I actually did have Oregon winning bigger, but I would take the points with Oregon because I think it's going to be a super close game. It's probably going to end up being a very 2 minute or less, like the score is not decided yet. It may be a final drive type of game, but I am going to have Oregon winning this just because they're unblemished. I have no reason to pick otherwise, and just a couple of things in the back of my head are still existing from just how poor the Buckeyes looked at certain points of the season.
Yeah, it's weird that it can kind of, your perception of a team can be stained by one matchup. Michigan against Ohio State plagues us, but if you remove the Wolverines from the equation, there's a lot to like, obviously, about Ohio State. It's kind of like Peyton could never beat Florida. Georgia forever couldn't get past Bama. The Steelers could never get past Brady. This maybe is one of those things that we'll look back and just say, yeah, their kryptonite is that particular team, but take away Michigan and they're the best team in the country. Next up, the Peach in Atlanta. It is those aforementioned Longhorns against the Arizona State Sun Devils. Arizona State plus 13 in this one. Scattaboo. The thing is, you look at the Horns, and I know I've said this a bunch the last couple of months. They never really overwhelmed their competition offensively. I know they're loaded up, but they didn't pound anybody in the SEC into submission, save one win, I think, against Florida at some point during the season. It's their defense that's the difference maker. You can make a pretty good case that Arizona State has more quality wins. Weird to say, but they beat K-State and BYU. Who did Texas beat all year long? I do ultimately think, and as much as I've knocked the SEC minus this season, I think this is one of those attrition games. Horns 35-21. Hench, how say you?
Yeah, I'm right in your garage. I think it's actually even worse. I have Texas 40, ASU 17.
Hmm.
Football, basketball with the three-pointer and zone defense, like you can pull those upsets in the tournament when the other team's five starters are better than all your five starters. It's the nature of the game. But when none of your guys would be recruited by the other school. There's just a size and athleticism in football that doesn't allow teams who are outgunned to keep it close, especially if your bread and butter is on the ground. You get down 10, you're going to get down 17, you're going to get down 24. I think this thing snowballs again. The theme of this tournament is to make the people who designed it look stupid, and that's going to happen again here in a big way.
Spaghetti.
I know it's a big number in this game, and I typically would just say I think Texas is a class above them. They're going to win this game. They're going to cover this game too. But I just part of me thinks like obviously Texas knows to stop, Scatterboo because who's a guy that in other years would have been probably further along in the Heisman conversation, and every team's going to key on him to stop him.
It
But I
happened
think
too late. It's sort of like that
sure,
Cincy loss flipped things for them, and then they caught fire from about that. But they beat you. I think they beat Utah, and then they lose that game. But
yeah.
then from then on, they're a different team.
Yeah, great wins in K-State, BYU, and then Iowa State too. Blew out Iowa State
Yeah, right.
in the championship game there. I think even though they want to key in and stop Scatterbo, I just think that he's still so good that he's going to be able to get his on the and Dillingham's going to have those guys fired up, and I think he's people don't like him as a head coach, but he's a young guy. He says a lot of kind of brash things, but I think for this program that needs somebody to after the whole Herm Edwards debacle, they need somebody like Dillingham there. I think on the flip side of things, the reason why I'm not super comfortable is like, and this is coming out like today when we're recording, like the $6 million offer for Quinn Ewers to hop back in the portal, stay in college football, do not go to the NFL. I don't think he should go to the NFL anyway after a kind of a weird year. But when you're now focusing on like, man, am I going to even beat at Arch Manning if I want to stay in Texas? Do I want to go to UNC with Belichick? Notre Dame apparently was in the mix, even though Notre Dame is saying we're not going to use the portal again. But like Quinn Ewers is now not just focused on this game, and I think just due to the injuries they suffered in the beginning of the year, and I just you're not really loving the football from Quinn Ewers, even the SEC title game, and ASU's coming in here with nothing really to lose. Like they know they're playing with house money here. If they win, it's a fantastic story. And if they lose, it's like, well, you're supposed to lose. I do think they keep it within the 13 and a half. Maybe it's a 10-point, 7-point loss, but Texas will win. But ASU, Dillingham's bunch will make it a game, I think.